Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to love you? Have you ever smiled through comments that cut deeper than any knife, pretending everything was fine while your heart slowly shattered into a million pieces? Well, let me tell you about the moment I realized that the people I called family were slowly destroying my sense of self-worth, one gathering at a time. This is my story, and I'm sharing it because I know I'm not alone in this pain. I know there are others out there who have felt exactly what I felt, who have swallowed their pride and their hurt just to keep the peace, just to maintain relationships that were supposed to be sacred and unbreakable. My name doesn't matter, but my story does, because it's the story of countless people who have been made to feel small by the very people who should have been their biggest cheerleaders. It started so innocuously that I almost didn't notice it at first. I was 26 years old, fresh out of graduate school, and I had just landed my dream job as a wildlife conservation coordinator. I remember the day I got the offer letter, how my hands trembled as I read it, how tears of joy streamed down my face because I had worked so hard for this moment. This wasn't just any job to me. This was my calling, my purpose, the thing that made me jump out of bed every morning with excitement and passion coursing through my veins. I had spent years studying, volunteering, working unpaid internships, living on ramen noodles and hope, all to reach this point. My job involved working with endangered species, coordinating with international organizations, developing conservation strategies, and educating communities about environmental protection. To me, it was everything. To my family, as I would soon discover, it was nothing. The first family gathering after I got the job was my cousin Rachel's engagement party. It was a beautiful spring evening, and my aunt's backyard was decorated with twinkling lights and flowers. I was so excited to share my news, to finally tell everyone about this incredible opportunity that had come my way. I remember walking in with my head held high, feeling proud of myself for the first time in years. My Uncle James was the first to ask about my life. He was a corporate lawyer, the kind of man who measured success in six-figure salaries in corner offices. When I told him about my new position, his eyebrows raised slightly, and then he smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile you give a child who has just told you they want to be an astronaut when they grow up. "Wildlife conservation?" he said, his voice dripping with barely concealed condescension. "That's nice, sweetie. Very noble. But what are you actually going to do career-wise? I mean, long-term?" I felt my stomach drop. The way he emphasized "actually" made it clear that he didn't consider what I was doing to be a real career. I tried to explain the importance of the work, the research components, the policy advocacy, but I could see his eyes glazing over. He patted my shoulder and said, "Well, as long as you're happy playing with animals, that's what matters." Playing with animals. Those words echoed in my head for days. I had earned 2 degrees, published research papers, presented at conferences, and to him, I was just playing. But that was just the beginning. At that same party, my Aunt Linda, who worked in pharmaceutical sales, asked me about my salary. When I hesitated, not wanting to discuss something so personal at a party, she laughed and said, "Oh, honey, that bad, huh? Don't worry, we all have to start somewhere. Maybe once you get this idealistic phase out of your system, you can get a real job that actually pays the bills." I felt heat rising to my cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger that I couldn't quite express. My cousin Derek, who had recently been promoted to regional manager at a tech company, overheard and joined in. "Yeah, I mean, saving the planet is great and all, but you've got to think about your future. Retirement, healthcare, a mortgage. Can you really see yourself doing this when you're 40? I tried to defend myself, to explain that my job came with benefits, that I had a salary that allowed me to live comfortably, that not everyone measures success by the size of their paycheck. But my words felt weak against their certainty, their absolute conviction that they knew better than I did what constituted a worthy life path. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked back at me, and I saw someone who was beginning to doubt everything they had worked for. I splashed cold water on my face and told myself it was just one conversation, that they didn't understand, that it would get better. It didn't get better. Over the next 18 months, every single family gathering became an exercise in emotional endurance. Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas celebrations, Easter brunches, birthday parties, graduations, baby showers. Every event was another opportunity for my family to remind me that I was somehow less than them. My father's sister, Aunt Margaret, who had married into money and considered herself the matriarch of our extended family, took particular pleasure in these subtle digs. She would introduce me to her friends by saying, "This is my niece. She works with animals. She's very passionate, even if it doesn't pay much. The way she emphasized passionate made it sound like a character flaw, like being driven by something other than money was naive and childish. My younger cousin Emma, who was still in college, started asking me for career advice. But when I shared my experiences, my Aunt Carol would interrupt and say, "Emma, sweetie, you should really talk to your Uncle James or Cousin Derek if you want real career guidance. They can tell you how to actually succeed." The implication was crystal clear. I had not succeeded. Despite my master's degree, despite my published research, despite the fact that I was making a tangible difference in protecting endangered ecosystems, I was not a success in their eyes. I was the cautionary tale, the example of what happens when you follow your heart instead of your wallet. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was the tone, the looks, the way they would exchange glances when I talked about my work, as if to say, "Can you believe she's still doing this?" It was the way conversations would shift away from me as quickly as possible, as if my life wasn't interesting enough to warrant discussion. When Derek talked about his latest promotion, everyone hung on his every word, asking questions, offering congratulations, celebrating his achievements. When I mentioned that our team had successfully relocated a population of endangered tortoises, effectively saving them from extinction, my Aunt Linda literally yawned and changed the subject to ask my cousin about her new car. I started to dread these gatherings weeks in advance. The anxiety would build in my chest like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe, hard to sleep, hard to focus on anything else. I would rehearse conversations in my head, trying to prepare responses to their inevitable comments, trying to build up armor that would protect me from their words. But no matter how prepared I thought I was, they always found new ways to make me feel small. My grandmother, who I had always been close to, started making comments too. "When are you going to settle down and get a stable job?" she would ask, as if I wasn't already settled, as if what I was doing wasn't stable. "I worry about you, darling. This isn't sustainable. What will you do when you want to start a family? Can you really support children on a conservationist salary?" The thing that hurt the most was that none of them ever asked me if I was happy. They never asked about the 14 sea turtle hatchlings we had successfully protected from poachers. They never asked about the educational programs I had developed that were now being implemented in 12 different schools. They never asked about the feeling of watching a rehabilitated eagle take flight after months of recovery, or the satisfaction of seeing an ecosystem beginning to heal because of policies we had fought for. They never asked because they had already decided that what I was doing wasn't worth celebrating, wasn't worth recognizing, wasn't worth anything at all. Have you ever felt like your achievements meant nothing to the people whose opinions you valued most? Comment below if you've experienced this kind of dismissal from your own family. I remember one particular incident that still makes my heart ache when I think about it. It was my grandmother's 80th birthday party, a huge celebration with extended family coming from different states. I had been working on a major project for months, a collaborative effort with international conservation organizations to establish a protected wildlife corridor spanning 3 countries. It was groundbreaking work, the kind of thing that would impact ecosystems for generations to come. We had just received confirmation that the project had been approved and funded, and I was so proud, so excited to share this news with my family. I thought surely this would make them understand the significance of what I was doing. Surely this would make them see that my work mattered. I waited for the right moment during dinner, when everyone was gathered around the table, glasses raised in celebration of my grandmother's long life. After the toasts, during a lull in conversation, I mentioned the project. I tried to explain it in terms they would understand, focusing on the international cooperation aspect, the significant funding we had secured, the long-term impact it would have. My Uncle James looked at me with what I can only describe as pity. "That's great, really," he said, in a tone that suggested it was anything but great. "But have you thought about what this means for your career trajectory? Where do you go from here? You're almost 30 now. Shouldn't you be thinking about building equity, about real assets, about climbing the corporate ladder?" Before I could respond, my cousin Derek jumped in. "I mean, I think it's cool that you're doing something you believe in, but let's be real here. What's your salary? What's your 5-year plan? What's your exit strategy?" Exit strategy. As if my career was something I needed to escape from, as if the work I loved was a trap I had fallen into and needed to find my way out of. I tried to explain that not every career path looked the same, that success could be measured in more ways than just financial gain, that the impact I was making on the world was my success story. But I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was deluded, that I was making excuses for failure, that I was trying to rationalize a poor life choice. My Aunt Linda, who had had a few glasses of wine by this point, decided to be honest with me. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. We're family, so I'm going to tell you what you need to hear. This little conservation hobby of yours is nice, but it's time to grow up. You're not a kid anymore. You need to think about stability, about building a real future. Look at Derek. Look at Rachel. Look at your cousin Mike. They're all doing real work, making real money, building real lives. When are you going to join the real world? The table went quiet. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my response, and I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I felt my throat closing up, my hands shaking under the table. I wanted to scream, to cry, to make them understand that I was in the real world, that my work was real, that the animals I protected were real, that the ecosystems I helped preserve were real, that the future generations who would benefit from my work were real. But instead, I just smiled. I smiled that same smile I had been perfecting over 18 months of these gatherings. That smile that said everything was fine even when everything was falling apart inside. I excused myself, claiming I needed to check on something for work, and I walked out of that party with my head down and tears streaming silently down my face. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes, sobbing, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. These were my people. This was my family, and they made me feel worthless. That night, sitting in my car outside my grandmother's house, something inside me shifted. A small, quiet voice in the back of my mind whispered, "You don't have to keep doing this." The weeks following that birthday party were some of the darkest of my life. I found myself questioning everything I had built, everything I had worked for, everything I believed in. I would wake up in the morning and the first thought in my mind would be my Aunt Linda's words, "When are you going to join the real world?" I started looking at job postings for corporate positions that I knew I would hate but that might finally earn my family's approval. I even went so far as to update my resume, to reach out to a few contacts in the private sector, to imagine what my life might look like if I just gave in and became what they wanted me to be. But every time I thought about walking away from conservation work, I felt physically ill. My chest would tighten, my stomach would turn, and I would feel this profound sense of loss for something I hadn't even given up yet. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she specialized in family dynamics and self-worth issues. In our first session, I broke down completely, ugly crying in her office as I tried to explain the situation. "I don't understand," I sobbed. "I'm doing everything right. I went to school, I got good grades, I found work I'm passionate about, I'm making a difference in the world. Why isn't that enough for them? Why do they make me feel like I'm failing at life?" Dr. Chen looked at me with such kindness and understanding that it almost made me cry harder. "Tell me," she said gently, "do you feel like you're failing?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I said quietly. "I love my job. I love what I do. I'm good at it. I'm making a real impact. But when I'm with my family, I feel like none of that matters." Over the next several sessions, Dr. Chen helped me understand something crucial. My family's inability to value my work was about them, not about me. It was about their narrow definition of success, their need to measure worth in dollars and titles, their discomfort with someone choosing a path that didn't align with their values. "You're threatening their worldview," she explained. "When you succeed on your own terms, living a fulfilling life doing work that matters to you, it challenges their belief that success only looks one way. It's easier for them to dismiss your choices than to question their own." This revelation was both liberating and heartbreaking. It meant that nothing I did would ever be enough to earn their approval, because their disapproval wasn't really about me at all. Dr. Chen introduced me to the concept of boundaries, something I had never really learned in my family growing up. We had always been close, or so I thought. We celebrated everything together. We showed up for each other. We maintained this image of a tight-knit, supportive family unit. But Dr. Chen helped me see that closeness without respect isn't really closeness at all. It's just proximity. It's just obligation. She asked me a question that changed everything. What would it feel like if you didn't go to the next family gathering? The question took my breath away. Not go? Skip a family event? The very idea felt rebellious, disrespectful, wrong. But as I sat with the question, I realized that what I was actually feeling was relief. The thought of not subjecting myself to another evening of subtle insults and dismissive comments filled me with such profound relief that I almost laughed out loud. But the guilt was crushing. How could I abandon my family? How could I hurt them like that? What would they think of me? Dr. Chen gently pointed out that I was worried about hurting people who had been hurting me consistently for over a year and a half. You're allowed to protect yourself, she said. You're allowed to prioritize your mental health and emotional well-being. You're allowed to step back from relationships that are harming you, even if those relationships are with family members. She gave me permission to do something I had never allowed myself to do, put my own needs first. That session was a turning point. I drove home feeling like I had been carrying a boulder on my shoulders and someone had finally helped me set it down. The next family event was my cousin Mike's baby shower in late September. The invitation came in the mail, a cheerful card with cartoon storks and balloons, requesting my presence to celebrate new life and new beginnings. I stared at that invitation for 3 days, feeling that familiar knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. I could already imagine how it would go. I would show up with a carefully selected gift, I would smile and make small talk, and inevitably someone would ask about my job. And then it would start all over again. The comments, the concerned looks, the thinly veiled judgment, the suggestion that I should really consider a more practical career path. I could feel my chest tightening just thinking about it. And then I thought about Dr. Chen's words. You're allowed to protect yourself. I made a decision that felt both terrifying and empowering. I wasn't going to go. For the first time in my entire life, I was going to decline a family invitation, not because I was sick or had a work emergency or had some legitimate excuse that they would accept. I was declining because I didn't want to go, because going would hurt me, because I deserved better than to be made to feel small by people who claim to love me. I didn't send a dramatic text or write a long email explaining my decision. I didn't call anyone to announce that I was setting boundaries. I simply RSVP'd no, sent a gift card with a kind note, and didn't explain myself beyond saying I had other commitments. It was the first time I had ever put my emotional well-being ahead of family obligation, and it felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there would be water below to catch my fall. The response was immediate, and exactly what I had feared. My phone started buzzing with texts from my mother, my aunts, my cousins. Why aren't you coming? Is everything okay? Did something happen? Mike really wants you there. I responded simply, keeping my messages brief and vague. I have other commitments that day. So sorry to miss it. Congratulations to Mike and Jennifer. I refused to elaborate, refused to justify, refused to explain. And you know what? The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. My family was disappointed, but they survived. And I survived too. But better than that, I thrived. That weekend, while they were all gathered at the baby shower, presumably talking about me and wondering what was wrong, I was volunteering at a sea turtle conservation site, watching tiny hatchlings make their way to the ocean for the first time. I was doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who understood and valued that work, and I felt more at peace than I had felt in years. That first decision to skip an event opened a door I didn't know existed. It showed me that I had agency, that I had choice, that I didn't have to keep subjecting myself to pain just because these people shared my DNA. The next invitation came for Thanksgiving dinner at my Uncle James's house. This one was harder because Thanksgiving was a big deal in our family, a tradition that went back generations. My grandmother would be there, and I knew she would be hurt by my absence. But I also knew that sitting at that table, listening to everyone talk about their accomplishments while mine were dismissed, would undo all the progress I had made in therapy. So I declined again. This time, I was more honest. I told my mother that I needed some space, that I was focusing on my own well-being, that I would see everyone soon. She didn't understand, and her hurt and confusion came through clearly in her voice. But I held firm. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up without that familiar knot of dread in my stomach. I made myself a simple breakfast, took a long walk in nature, and then spent the afternoon working on a research paper I had been putting off. In the evening, I video called my grandmother privately, just the two of us, and we had a beautiful conversation about her life, her memories, the things she was grateful for. It was intimate and real in a way that our interactions at large family gatherings never were. She told me she missed me at dinner, but she also told me that I looked happier than I had looked in a long time. "You've got a glow about you, darling," she said. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." I wondered if she understood more than she let on, if maybe she had noticed how the family treated me and was quietly giving me permission to take care of myself. Christmas brought the biggest test. My Aunt Margaret, the family matriarch, was hosting, and she made it very clear through multiple texts and a phone call that everyone was expected to attend. "No excuses this year," she said firmly. "Family comes first, and we need to all be together for the holidays." The pressure was immense. My mother called me crying, begging me to come, saying that people were starting to talk, that everyone was worried about me, that I was causing drama by staying away. But I wasn't causing drama. I was simply choosing not to attend events where I was disrespected. There's a difference, though my family couldn't seem to see it. I spent Christmas Eve alone in my apartment, wrapped in blankets, watching old movies, and feeling both guilty and relieved. Christmas Day, I volunteered at a local wildlife rehabilitation center, helping care for injured animals that had been brought in during the harsh winter weather. There was a red-tailed hawk that had been shot by a hunter and was recovering from wing surgery. I spent hours that day sitting near her enclosure, talking softly to her, marveling at her strength and resilience. She had been hurt badly, but she was fighting to survive, fighting to fly again. I felt a kinship with her that I couldn't quite explain. We were both recovering from wounds inflicted by others, both learning that sometimes you have to retreat and heal before you can soar again. As I drove home that evening, I realized something profound. I didn't miss the gathering. I didn't miss the forced small talk, the fake smiles, the inevitable comments about my career choices. What I missed was the idea of a loving, supportive family. But the reality of my family gatherings had never matched that ideal. I was mourning something that had never actually existed, at least not for me, not in recent years. The months passed, and I continued to quietly decline family invitations. I didn't make a big announcement about it. I didn't send a group text explaining that I was setting boundaries or that I was hurt by their treatment of me. I simply stopped showing up, stopped subjecting myself to their judgment, stopped pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. And something interesting happened. In my absence, I began to remember who I was before I had internalized their criticism. I remembered the passionate, confident young woman who had started this career path with stars in her eyes and fire in her belly. I remembered that I had chosen this work not despite its challenges, but because of its importance. I remembered that I was good at what I did, that I was making a difference, that my work mattered whether my family acknowledged it or not. My mental health improved dramatically. The anxiety that had been my constant companion for nearly 2 years began to fade. I slept better. I ate better. I found joy in my work again, without that nagging voice in the back of my mind asking if it was enough, if I was enough, if I should be doing something different. I started accepting social invitations from colleagues, building friendships with people who understood and valued the work I did. I joined a book club with other conservation professionals, attended conferences where my research was met with interest and respect, and slowly rebuilt the sense of self-worth that my family had eroded. I was healing, and it felt like learning to breathe again after years of holding my breath. Do you think it's selfish to prioritize your own mental health over family expectations? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. For nearly 6 months, my absence went largely unaddressed. My mother would call occasionally, making passive-aggressive comments about how I never came around anymore, but she never directly confronted me about it. My siblings, who had mostly been silent bystanders to the family's treatment of me, sent occasional texts asking if I was okay, but none of them seemed willing to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And then, in late spring, my grandmother fell ill. She was hospitalized with pneumonia, and suddenly everyone was in crisis mode. My mother called me, her voice frantic, telling me I needed to come to the hospital, that grandmother was asking for me, that family needed to be together during this difficult time. And here's where it got complicated, because I did love my grandmother. She had participated in the judgment to some degree, but she had never been cruel about it. She had expressed concern, not contempt. I went to the hospital, my heart pounding as I walked through those automatic doors, knowing I would have to face my entire family for the first time in months. They were all there in the waiting room, my parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, everyone gathered in this moment of shared worry. When I walked in, the room went quiet. My mother rushed over to hug me, and I could feel her relief and her anger all tangled up together in that embrace. My Aunt Linda gave me a long, assessing look, as if trying to figure out what had changed about me. My Uncle James nodded at me awkwardly, and my cousin Derek pretended to be very interested in his phone. No one said anything about my months-long absence. No one asked why I had been avoiding them. They just made space for me in the circle, and we all waited together to hear news about my grandmother. She recovered, thank goodness. Within a week, she was back home and insisting she was fine, that everyone was making too much fuss. But that hospital waiting room experience seemed to trigger something in my family. They couldn't ignore my absence anymore. They couldn't pretend everything was normal when I had clearly been keeping my distance. About a week after my grandmother came home, my mother asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed, knowing this conversation was inevitable, steeling myself for what was coming. We sat across from each other in a busy cafe, and my mother stirred her coffee for what felt like 5 minutes before finally speaking. "Everyone is worried about you," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You've been so distant." We don't understand what's going on. Did someone say something to upset you? Did something happen? I took a deep breath and made a decision to be honest. Really honest. Probably for the first time since this whole situation began. Yes, I said quietly. Something did happen. Actually, many things happened. For almost 2 years, every time we got together as a family, someone made a comment about my job, about my choices, about my life. I was made to feel small and foolish and like I was failing at life because I didn't choose a traditional career path. I was dismissed, talked over, and treated like my work didn't matter. And I got tired of it. I got tired of being made to feel worthless by people who are supposed to love and support me. My mother looked genuinely shocked. What are you talking about? When did this happen? Who said these things? I reminded her of specific incidents, specific comments, specific moments. The more I talked, the more I could see her trying to rationalize it, to minimize it, to explain it away. But they didn't mean anything by it, she insisted. That's just how they are. They're just concerned about your future. They want what's best for you. And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. To my family, their criticism was care. Their judgment was concern. Their dismissal of my life's work was just them trying to help me see the error of my ways. They couldn't understand that impact matters more than intention, that being hurt by their words didn't require them to have meant to hurt me. I tried to explain this to my mother, but I could see I wasn't getting through. She was defensive, protective of the family, unable to see that their behavior had been harmful. "You're being too sensitive," she finally said, and I felt that familiar sting of invalidation. "We're your family. We love you. You need to forgive and forget and come back to us." But I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to forgive people who hadn't acknowledged any wrongdoing. I didn't need to forget treatment that had deeply affected my mental health. I didn't need to come back to a situation that had been toxic for me. I needed to take care of myself, and if that meant maintaining distance from family, then that was what I needed to do. I told my mother that I loved her, that I loved all of them, but that I couldn't keep putting myself in situations that hurt me. I told her that until things changed, until there was acknowledgement and respect for my choices, I would be keeping my distance. She left that coffee shop hurt and angry, and I left feeling both relieved and sad. Relieved that I had finally spoken my truth, sad that it hadn't been received the way I hoped. Word of our conversation spread through the family like wildfire. Suddenly, I was getting calls and texts from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all with their own opinions about the situation. Some were angry, accusing me of being dramatic and ungrateful. "After everything this family has done for you, this is how you repay us?" My Uncle James texted. Some were confused, genuinely unable to understand why I was upset. "We've always supported you," my Aunt Carol wrote. "I don't know where this is coming from." And a few, surprisingly, were supportive. My cousin Rachel, whose engagement party had been the site of some of the first hurtful comments, called me and apologized. "I saw how they treated you," she admitted. "I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause problems, but I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry." Her words meant more to me than she probably realized. Just knowing that someone had witnessed the treatment, that I hadn't imagined it or blown it out of proportion, was validating in a way I desperately needed. My younger cousin Emma, the one who had been told not to seek career advice from me, reached out as well. She had just graduated college and was starting her own career in marine biology. "I want you to know that you inspired me," she wrote. "Watching you follow your passion even when everyone criticized you showed me that it was possible to choose a path that wasn't conventional. I'm so grateful for your example, even if the rest of the family doesn't see it." I cried when I read her message. All this time, I had thought my presence at family gatherings was only causing me pain, but apparently it had also been quietly inspiring someone else to be brave in their own choices. It made me wonder how many other family members might have been uncomfortable with the judgment, but stayed silent. How many might have secretly admired my courage but never said so, because speaking up would have made them targets too. Summer came, and with it, a whole new round of family events. Graduations, weddings, 4th of July barbecues. I declined them all. Each time got a little easier, but the guilt never fully disappeared. I felt it like a weight every time I clicked no on an invitation, every time I sent a polite text explaining I wouldn't be attending. But I also felt relief, felt freedom, felt like I was finally living authentically instead of performing for an audience that would never be satisfied. I spent that summer doing the work I loved, surrounded by people who valued that work. I led a team of volunteers in a beach cleanup initiative that removed over 3 tons of plastic from our local coastline. I published a research paper that was cited by other conservationists. I gave a presentation at an international conference that was met with a standing ovation. I was thriving in every way that mattered to me, even as my family relationships remained strained and distant. And then something unexpected happened. It was late August, and I was working late at the office, finishing up some grant applications, when I got a call from my Aunt Margaret. My heart sank when I saw her name on my phone screen. She was the last person I expected to hear from, the one who had seemed most disapproving of my choices, the one who had introduced me as the one who works with animals, with that tone of dismissive pity. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello?" I said cautiously. There was a long pause, and then her voice came through, different than I had ever heard it before. Quiet, almost tentative. "I owe you an apology," she said simply. I was so shocked I didn't know how to respond. "I've been thinking a lot since you stopped coming to family gatherings," she continued. "At first, I was angry. I thought you were being dramatic, that you were punishing the family for some imagined slight. But then I started really thinking about how we talked to you, how we treated your career choices, and I realized something. We were wrong." She went on to explain that her oldest son, my cousin Thomas, who I rarely saw because he lived across the country, had recently quit his high-paying job in finance to become a teacher. When she expressed disappointment in his choice, he had confronted her in a way he never had before, telling her that her narrow view of success had damaged their relationship. "He told me that he had watched how we treated you and decided he never wanted to share anything real with me because he knew I would judge him the way we judged you," she said, her voice breaking. "And he was right. I did judge you. We all did. We made you feel like your passion and your purpose didn't matter because they didn't fit into our definition of success. And I'm so sorry." I sat there in my office, phone pressed to my ear, tears streaming down my face. This was the acknowledgement I had needed, the validation I had been craving. It didn't erase the hurt, but it helped. We talked for over an hour that night. She asked me about my work, really asked, with genuine interest and curiosity. I told her about the projects I was working on, the challenges and the victories, the reasons why this work mattered so much to me. She listened without interrupting, without judging, without comparing my path to anyone else's. At the end of the conversation, she asked if I would be willing to come to the next family gathering, said that she would make sure the conversation stayed respectful. I told her I needed to think about it, that I appreciated her apology, but that I needed to see sustained change, not just words. She understood. Over the following weeks, other family members reached out as well. Not all of them, and not all with the same level of genuine remorse, but enough to make me feel like maybe, just maybe, something was shifting. My Uncle James sent a stiff but sincere email acknowledging that he had been dismissive of my career and that he realized now that success comes in many forms. My Aunt Linda called and admitted that her comments had been inappropriate and hurtful. My cousin Derek sent a text saying he admired my courage to follow my passion and that he wished he had that kind of conviction. These apologies didn't undo the years of hurt, but they were a start. They showed me that my absence had created a void that forced my family to examine their behavior, to question their assumptions, to consider that maybe the problem wasn't my sensitivity, but their lack of respect. My quiet withdrawal had been more powerful than any dramatic confrontation could have been. It had allowed them to feel the impact of losing me without the distraction of an argument or a fight. They had to sit with the consequences of their actions, and for some of them, that had been transformative. I did eventually attend another family gathering, about 3 months after my Aunt Margaret's phone call. It was my grandmother's 81st birthday, and she personally called to invite me, promising that things would be different. I was terrified walking into that party, my heart racing, my palms sweaty, wondering if I was making a mistake. But something had changed. People greeted me warmly, genuinely. My Uncle James asked about my work and actually listened to my answer. My Aunt Linda complimented me on a recent article I had been quoted in about coastal conservation. My cousin Derek told me he had made a donation to one of the wildlife organizations I worked with. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still people who clearly didn't understand why I had been so upset. But the overtly disrespectful comments were gone. The dismissive tone was absent. I was treated like an adult who had made valid choices, even if they weren't choices everyone understood. The most meaningful moment came when my grandmother pulled me aside during the party. She took my hands in hers, her skin papery and soft, her eyes bright with tears. "I'm proud of you," she said firmly. "Not just for the work you do, though that's remarkable. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, for teaching this family that respect is not negotiable, for showing us that love without respect is worthless." You did what I never had the courage to do in my own life, and watching you has been a gift." I hugged her tightly, feeling like something had come full circle. This woman who had helped raise me, who had been part of the chorus of concern about my choices, was now celebrating my strength in setting boundaries. It felt like vindication and healing all wrapped up together. That night, driving home from the party, I reflected on everything that had happened over the past few years. The hurt, the isolation, the difficult decision to step away, the slow process of healing, and now this tentative reconnection. I thought about the version of myself who had sat in her car sobbing after my grandmother's 80th birthday party, the woman who had felt so small and worthless and alone. I wanted to reach back through time and tell her that it would be okay, that standing up for herself would be hard but necessary, that she was worthy of respect and love, that her work mattered even if her family couldn't see it. I wanted to tell her that sometimes the people who love you can hurt you terribly, not because they're evil, but because they're operating from their own limitations, their own narrow worldviews, their own fears and insecurities. And I wanted to tell her that it's okay to step away from people who hurt you, even if they're family, even if it feels like betrayal, even if it comes with guilt and grief. The relationship with my family today is different than it was before all of this happened. It's more boundaried, more careful, more honest. I attend some family gatherings now, but not all of them, and I don't feel guilty about my choices anymore. I've learned to speak up when comments cross a line, to calmly but firmly redirect conversations that veer into judgment territory. Most importantly, I've learned that I don't need their approval to feel good about my life. Their opinions about my career don't define my worth or my success. I define those things for myself, and I'm doing incredible work that makes the world a better place, whether they recognize that or not. Some family members have become genuine supporters of my work, asking questions, sharing my projects on social media, even volunteering with conservation efforts themselves. Others remain politely distant, respectful but not engaged, and that's okay too. Not everyone needs to understand my path. They just need to respect it. Looking back on this entire experience, I've learned so much about family dynamics, about boundaries, about self-worth, and about the courage it takes to choose yourself even when it disappoints others. I've learned that silence can be more powerful than confrontation, that absence can speak louder than words, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who are hurting you. I've learned that real family, real love, real support all require respect as a foundation. Without respect, all you have is obligation and proximity, not genuine connection. I've learned that it's possible to love people and still maintain distance from them, that caring about someone doesn't mean you have to tolerate their mistreatment. And most importantly, I've learned that my worth is not determined by anyone's opinion of my choices, that my success is measured by my own values and goals, not by someone else's standards. If you're reading this and you've experienced something similar, if you have family members who dismiss your dreams, who belittle your choices, who make you feel small every time you're together, I want you to know that you're not alone. I want you to know that it's not your responsibility to keep subjecting yourself to that treatment just because they're family. You're allowed to set boundaries. You're allowed to step away. You're allowed to choose your peace over their approval. It's not easy, and it comes with grief and guilt and complicated emotions, but it's also necessary for your mental health and your sense of self. You deserve to be surrounded by people who celebrate your successes, who respect your choices even if they wouldn't make the same ones, who lift you up instead of tearing you down. And if your biological family can't or won't do that, then you're allowed to create your own family with people who will. The work I do matters. The animals I help protect, the ecosystems I work to preserve, the policies I advocate for, the education I provide, all of it matters deeply, profoundly, urgently. Our planet is in crisis, and people who dedicate their lives to conservation work are not playing or indulging in hobbies or wasting their potential. We're fighting for the future, for the survival of species, for the health of our planet, for the world we'll leave to the next generation. And I've finally accepted, deeply and completely, that this work would matter even if my family never acknowledged it. It would matter if I was doing it in complete anonymity. It would matter if no one ever thanked me or celebrated me or told me I was successful. Because success isn't about recognition. It's about alignment between your values and your actions. It's about going to bed at night knowing you spent your day doing something that mattered to you, something that made a positive difference in the world, something that you can be proud of. Today, I'm happy. Genuinely, authentically happy in a way I wasn't during those years when I was desperately seeking my family's approval. I wake up excited about my work. I'm surrounded by colleagues who respect and value me. I have friendships built on mutual support and understanding. I have a family that, while imperfect and still learning, has made real efforts to change their behavior and treat me with respect. And I have a deep sense of self-worth that isn't dependent on anyone else's validation. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. I know that my life has meaning and purpose and value. And that knowledge, that unshakable sense of self, is something no one can take away from me ever again. It's the gift I gave myself when I chose to step away, to protect myself, to stop performing for people who refuse to see me clearly. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. First, understand that this content is crucial for anyone who has struggled with family relationships, with feeling unseen or undervalued, with the difficult choice between maintaining family harmony and protecting your own well-being. This isn't just my story. It's the story of countless people who have had to set boundaries with family members, who have had to choose themselves even when it felt selfish or wrong. Understanding these dynamics, recognizing when relationships are harmful, and knowing that you have the right to protect yourself, these are life-changing realizations that can transform your relationship with yourself and with others. If my story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, or if you're currently struggling with family members who don't respect your choices, please leave a comment below. Share your experience. Tell me how you navigated it or how you're navigating it now. Let's create a community of people who understand that family should be a source of support, not a source of shame. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you think or feel or recognize something in your own life, please leave a like on this video. Your engagement helps this story reach more people who might need to hear it, who might be sitting in their car crying after a family gathering, who might be questioning their worth because the people they love most can't see their value. Subscribe to Living Through It for more real stories like this one, stories about the challenges we face, the boundaries we set, the growth we experience, and the strength we find when we choose ourselves. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, because every story we share here matters. Every experience has value, and every person watching this deserves to know they're not alone in their struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, for holding space for my experience, for being part of this community. Your support means more than you know.